It is my pleasure to introduce John and Lorrie Anderson, who probably don't need much introduction, in Calgary. Birders who have traveled a lot in the last, I don't know how many years, all over the place, and recently to New Zealand. Well, recently, I guess it's, yeah, almost a year ago, to New Zealand. So we're looking forward to learning about New Zealand tonight. So John and Lorrie, over to you.
Thank you, Anne, for that introduction. And yeah, as you can see, we went to New Zealand in November 2022. Give you a little background there. COVID restrictions were was taken off of New Zealand in June, and we booked the trip, not knowing 100% if we could actually go to New Zealand, but the restrictions stayed off, and we decided bucket list time, let's go. So that's what we did. Anyways, so New Zealand is, as you can see there, is less than half the size of Alberta. It's approximately 1,600 kilometers long by 400 kilometers wide. So it probably extends from northern Alberta down to the very southern border. Population is about the same as Alberta. Interesting fact, the sheep outnumber the humans by 10-1. New Zealand was uninhabited until the Polynesians came approximately 750 years ago. And so there was, the only thing that was there was like birds, and that was about it. Just because it developed so far off of Australia and all the other continents in that area. No endemic land mammals other than 2 species of bats is the only mammals. Apex hunters, there basically were none until humans arrived. And of course, the killer whales would come through the various different ocean waters there at times. Climate is described as oceanic Mediterranean. I kind of likened it to Vancouver in the springtime when we were there. And rainfall ranges from 12 meters per year to 500 millimeters per year, depending on location. They do have daily earthquakes, and they actually have an app that gives you the earthquake intensity and times and everything that you check every day. And we never felt one, but while we were there was definitely earthquakes. Endemic birds, there's 168 of them. Extinct birds, 55 plus 1 probable. Introduced birds are 77. These are birds that Europeans and various other people that have come to New Zealand have brought with them. No raptors other than swamp harrier or New Zealand falcon. Now, this is kind of interesting that, you know, you look up in the blue skies and everything and nothing flying around as far as raptors is concerned. 3 owls, the little owl, the moor pork, and the barn owl, which is introduced. Introduced birds can be found in urban parks, but most endemic birds are in very specific habitat or predator-free preserves. And we'll talk more about the predator-free preserves later on. The silver fern, which is interesting, it's an endemic fern to New Zealand. It's used as a symbol on the Air New Zealand planes and the logos elsewhere. For example, like Canada has the maple leaf, New Zealand has the silver fern, and it's carried through into the armed forces and whatnot. So they're quite proud of it. Our first week there, we stayed in beachlands. So beachlands, as you can see, is low ways out of Auckland. Here's Auckland over here, and beachlands are over here. And we basically picked that location just because it's very close to the water, like the this bay out here, and it had some natural parks and everything very close at hand. There's excellent ferry service between beachlands and Auckland or any of the other islands. So we basically, for that first week, birded around beachlands. And also did a day trip to the Miranda Shorebird headquarters, which is located down here in this location. So Auckland itself, we took a ferry there, and Auckland is just a pretty city. Reminded me a lot of Vancouver, maybe a little bit of Toronto, with all the sky rises and you know, of course, this tower that's there and everything. Very modern type city as compared to other cities within New Zealand. Beachlands, I find it was kind of interesting. There was no water supply, like municipal water supply. And as a consequence, each homeowner had to put in these water tanks, whether they be buried or above ground, to capture rainwater coming off the roofs and through the eavesdrops. And as you see, these tanks are pretty fairly large, and probably 1,000 gallons each, whatever. The place we stayed at, they had them buried underneath the deck. And I asked the lady, I said, so what happens if you run out of water? She said, well, there's a municipal water truck that gets water from wherever the supply is, and they bring it to you and they fill up your tank. So anyway, so that was kind of interesting that they have their water supplies all comes naturally. But of course, sewage and everything else taken care of by the municipal. Urban parks around beachlands are very pretty. You can see here kind of wetlands. And then over on the right-hand side here, this is actually an RV park that there was no RVs there because, of course, this is early spring. And this is just a short distance from our bed and breakfast that we stayed there. So, talking about birds. Some of the birds you see on our walk around the beachlands, the Eurasian blackbird, which is introduced, and the song thrush is introduced, looks quite a bit like our hermit thrush. Or the silver eye is a native bird. And when I say native, it means that it's local here and breeds here, but it's also located elsewhere in the world. We also have some cases here, alternate names to some of these birds. So we find it quite interesting. We try to find a bird on eBird. The name can be like totally different than the one that's in the book or the one that the guide tells you. And so you end up sometimes having 2 or 3 different types of or different names for the birds, and of course they're all the same. Obviously the Latin name is a definitive name, but anyways, yeah, this little silver eye or white eye is kind of a cute little bird in the flowers. Goldfinches, we have European goldfinch, which is introduced, a greenfinch, both the male and female, and chaffinch. And chaffinch is quite a pretty little bird. And of course, it was located all around New Zealand. Once we got out into the countryside, we started picking up Eurasian skylarks. And they're, what were you going to say about the skylark?
So I don't know if anybody knows the skylark, but what they do is the male flies about 100 meters in the air and starts singing, and then it sings as it descends down to the ground. They were imported because they're so pretty. Their song is unbelievable.
And the gray warbler, no, this is interesting. So our guy kept saying he saw
Georigine.
Yeah, it's like, what bird is this? I can't find it in eBird. I can't find it on the books. And we have 2 different books, and sometimes each book has a different name for the bird. Anyways, it's a gray warbler. It's endemic to New Zealand, and it's quite active, feeding around, similar to like our chickadee. Now here's a pretty bird. The New Zealand gray fantail is an endemic bird. 3 subspecies, and you'll find this sometimes in some of these birds where, because the birds are very localized, you have a North Island, a South Island, and Chatham Island fantails. And if you want, you could call them each a unique species, but basically they're all the same.
And what I was going to say is we love this bird. It's like a chickadee, and they were in the forests and always have their tail fanned like that. Yeah. They're very cute. And that was one of my favorites.
Gulls, we saw some gulls, of course, and red-billed gull. or a silver gull, endemic to New Zealand. And the southern blackback gull, which is a native to New Zealand, also called a kelp gull. What's interesting is there's only like 3 gulls basically, and the southern blackback gull is the largest of the gull, and of course is quite dark and very easy to pick out at any distance at all. Then the black-billed gull. Now, if you notice, the black-billed gull always has black bill and a very dainty bill. And here you see the male and female feeding each other or doing their display courtship routine. Another bird we saw walk around the parks of beachlands is the spur-winged plover, and it's quite the bird with this wattle on either side of his head, and it's actually around in all the little playgrounds and some of the other natural or unnatural area, you might say, but also in the out in the open too. White-faced heron. Now this is very similar to our great blue heron, slightly smaller, and obviously has a white face. And it can be found anywhere from close to the suburbs out into the marshy lands and everything. Welcome swallow is a native bird, and it's the only swallow that you'll find in New Zealand. It's obviously very active and quite a flyer. The myna bird, of course, is an introduced species, and it's almost a pest, shall we say. It's almost like our magpie. Now here, this is, the very first bird that you see is like, goes, wow, is a tui. The first time I saw it, I looked at it, I thought, what is that thing in the front of the throat, right? And you realize what it is. It looks like a little bow tie. They have these 2 little white balls, or underneath their throats. Looks like, say, it looks just like a bow tie. And depending on the light, you can either get like the bird in the center that has some almost like a starling, or you've seen magpies in various lakes where sometimes that iridescence can really be brought out. Anyways, the tui is one of those birds, and it's just a beautiful bird. And the songs that this thing plays or sings, pretty amazing. It's a wide variety. It's almost like almost like a grackle, I think, or
it's very melodic.
yeah. Very, yeah. We were walking along, and here's this bird in the bush, like just this is at a park just down from Beachlands and Eastern Rosella. And now these are a real beautiful little parrot introduced from Australia, is it?
Yeah, Australia.
Yeah, and they're cute little cute, or quite a colorful bird, and aren't all of that concerned about humans walking around. So it's easy to get good pictures of it. Now, this is the one that took us about 3 days to find one, Australian magpie. And but it's introduced, but it's also a pest, as it goes after, like crows or a magpie, goes after young birds and eggs and all the other stuff and everything. So now here's a bird you're going to find pretty well all throughout New Zealand, Australasian swamp hen. Now it's native to here, but it's also known elsewhere. And this bird is distinguished by of course, the red bill and on the head covering, and this bluish, purplish type coloring elsewhere through the body, and a white tail. They also have these huge feet, just like our coots or other type of swamp type birds. And it's a chick of the swamp hen, and he had a hard time walking through the tall grass with his big feet. But okay, now this bird is very similar to the swamp hen, called the South Island takahe. Okay, it's endemic to New Zealand. It was rediscovered in 1948. They thought it was actually gone extinct, and they found it in some a far off location in New Zealand. And what they've done then is taken a couple of the breeding pairs and brought them into controlled environments like a zoo or that type of thing. And but they left the other ones out in the areas, and I guess you can get a permit to go see them, but it's they're quite a ways off, and there's only, there's not that many birds, maybe 400 birds left. They're really trying hard to preserve them.
This was in an enclosure. That's why you can see that was through a fence.
Yeah, I was taking pictures through a chain link fence. So, but anyways, yeah. So that's it's quite a unique bird. The shell duck, now paradise shell duck is endemic, and the female has the white head, and of course the male has the black head, and they're quite almost like they call it a shell duck. It's almost the size of a small goose, maybe a cackling goose or that type of thing. So it's a interesting bird, and you find this bird all throughout New Zealand, whether in small flocks or in pairs. We didn't really see any large flocks of them. So the New Zealand pigeon is the one on the left there. Now that pigeon is about 20 to 22 inches in length. So it's a very large pigeon, and it sits quietly in the woods, and you can be walking along, and it's very accustomed to having people, and you'd be walking along and it realizes, what is that white thing? And there's a line through it or whatever, right? The neck coloration. And it's like all of a sudden you realize, it's a bird, right? It's like, it just sits so quietly and motionless, and you just don't even know it's standing there looking at you.
And they're very, very pretty.
Yeah. Spotted dove to the right. Obviously the spots on the neck, what the name is derived from. And it's of course introduced. This New Zealand kingfisher, or the sacred kingfisher, we found this bird
Everywhere.
pretty well everywhere, and it's very similar to our kingfishers, and the fact that it was around water, swampy type things, and obviously going after fish and crayfish and that sort of thing.
And it's very tiny.
Yeah, it's not that large. It's okay. So we did mention that we went to the Miranda Shorebird Center at our stay at Beachlands, and Lori's going to tell you a little bit about it.
So this is a shorebird hotspot. It's world famous. And thousands of shorebirds can be seen on the shell banks and tidal flats. And it's an important wintering ground for all the Arctic nesting shorebirds. And many New Zealand birds are residents or breed there too. And so we went twice, once on our own and then once with the guide on the guided trip. And the tide, what you do is check the tide tables. And when the tide is in, that's when you want to be there, because it forces the birds up onto the beaches. And it was amazing. And John got some pretty good pictures of all the birds.
Yeah. The most impressive bird to me was the bar-tailed godwit. Now, this bird flies from Alaska up in the Bering Sea there, all the way down to New Zealand nonstop. And when we got there, the flocks were just starting to arrive. Prior to leaving Alaska, though, they bulk up with half their body weight is being fat preserves or reserves prior to departure. And in fact, this is I found interesting. The gizzard and the intestines actually shrink because they aren't eating anything, so they don't need it. It's almost nothing to make sure they get their fat reserves up to what they need. And then they average 56 kilometers an hour, covering 11,000 kilometers in 8+ days. So it's like, that's pretty amazing to fly that long and end up landing in New Zealand time after time after time. I mean, it's like, I don't know how they do it. So anyways, it was a pretty interesting bird. And as I say, when we were there, the main flocks would just start and come there. And so some of the 4,000 or so godwits, we saw that those couple of days we were there.
Yeah, I don't have anything else to say on that.
So we couldn't get too close to them. So I don't have like a real, close-up shot of them. Just basically as you got close, they'd all fly away again. And anyways, but yeah, they were pretty amazing. The one bird at the same location we saw, the pied shag. So they call it a shag. We call it a cormorant. To take your pick, or you can go with the Maori name, the whatever it is. Anyways, this bird very distinctive coloring on the male's face. You can see with the yellow and the blue eye and everything. Very pretty shag or cormorant. This is ryebill. Now here's a bird that endemic to New Zealand, and we found this at the same location, and we got some actually, you see some good pictures of it. But Lori's going to say something about the left picture here.
So it's the only species of bird in the world with a beak that's bent sideways and in one direction, and it's always to the right.
You see this guy right here? See that the bill is bent to the right, and Lori was lucky enough to get a picture. I waited, and it kept getting side profile. Couldn't get the bent bill picture. And it was Lori got the bent bill picture. So
Anyway, and it's endemic to New Zealand.
yeah,
It's the only place you'll see it.
cute little thing, just like our little sandpipers. Stilts. So they have the pied stilt, and they look similar to our
Blackneck.
blackneck stilt. See the little baby there huddling underneath the mama. We also have a black stilt. Now this is an immature. This bird, if it's mature, would be entirely black with the pink legs,
And it's
endemic too. Yeah.
And so they're so rare. We only saw one, this bird, on our whole trip.
Yeah, we went to, I think, about 3 different locations looking for the black stilt.
Yeah, we only saw
And
one.
With the binoculars and the scopes and everything, and spent, like half an hour scoping all these mud flats and everything, and all we saw was one.
So it's very endangered.
Yeah, no, New Zealand dotterel, it's endemic, and this is a cute little bird, just like a little plover, or a little sandpiper. Has the male has that red breast, and I don't know if the middle picture, if it's the female that has slight bit of tinge of red, or if it's actually an immature male. But anyways, on the right is the baby, and so while we were there in November, of course, all these birds are either nesting or having young chicks that they're feeding. And this guy was quite independent. He wandered around the beach by himself, and mom and dad was kind of looking after him. So.
And the other thing is, at all the parks, they have fenced off, like shorelines, they have fenced off places for the shorebirds that are protected. So it was quite good that they were.
Yeah,
You
and
know.
people are warned to, keep their dogs on leash and everything,
Yeah,
right? Because,
it was good.
yeah, anyways. Oyster catchers, they had the variable oyster catcher, which is endemic to New Zealand. And so the variable oyster catcher can either be black, all black as the one on the left, or it can be mottled white and black as the one on the right, which are like immature birds. And then they have the South Island pied oyster catcher, and again is endemic. And this bird has very distinctive black and white. And basically, you can see this bird over here that I'm pointing to. That white shoulder mark, okay, is very distinctive, and it's easy to see. And if you see that, then it's the pied oyster catcher. And if you don't see it, that's the other one.
The variable.
Variable. That's when we started a North Island tour about then. It's 8 days. We did a pelagic trip where we saw thousands of shearwaters, petrels, prions, and other gannets, and a few albatrosses. We heard our first kiwi and more pork. We visited an island bird sanctuary, Tiri Island, just out of Auckland, and visit the gannet colony on the other side of the island, where we saw approximately 1,000 pairs of nesting gannets. Saw one blue duck for a couple of minutes. When we crossed the Queen Charlotte Sound, it was relatively calm, which is kind of nice. You should see some pictures of when it's not calm. It can be pretty bad. So, Caspian tern, obviously we have those up here in Canada, native bird, and they were the larger terns there. The little tern on the opposite side is about the size of a sparrow, and it's the native bird also.
And from Australia.
Yeah, from Australia. Now, white-fronted tern, endemic. If you look at this bird, though, they call it a white-fronted bird. Was the cap is between the cap and the bill, there's that white band, and so that's why I call it a white-fronted tern. The black-fronted tern is obviously the black cap goes all the way down to the bill. So that's the difference between the two, and they're both endemic. Australasian gannet is the native bird, and more on the gannets in a little bit. We saw a flesh-footed shearwater native bird, and there's lots of them around. White-capped albatross, endemic. Now it's interesting. This the New Zealanders call it the shy mollymox. So you try looking that up in eBird, it doesn't come up. The builder shearwater, endemic, and it was tough to get a picture of individual bird because there's like 5,000 of them off the boat. And if you look close at the water, you'll see the fish in the water here with the eyes. And so the fish are all coming up, a big school of fish, and these birds are going absolutely nuts on them. Wandering albatross, native bird, and fairly large, if I remember right.
We didn't.
Yeah. And here we go, a little movie going here. So this is on our pelagic trip. And here are the birds, and watch them all flying around. Now, on this video, that's the gannet that's dive bombing into the water to get the fish. So just watch them as they come down. And there's one coming up here. There, zoom, bang. I thought that was pretty cool. On the right here is, while we were out on our pelagic trip, they were trailing chum behind the boat. And that's what brought in the albatross and the prions, all the other birds and everything. The albatross can actually smell the bait from about, what did he say, it's like 25 miles or something?
Or, yeah,
Yeah,
long ways.
a long ways anyways.
It's crazy.
Yeah, so they just kept at the back of the boat. The ship's captain just kept chopping up the chum and chopping up the chum and putting it into a net type thing. And so between the smell of the chum coming off while he was doing all the cutting, and of course the chum in the water, that's what supposedly brought the birds in. Pacific reef heron, native bird. And what were you gonna say, Laura?
This is the only one we saw the whole time we were there, and there's only about 400 in New Zealand. But they aren't endemic, so they do occur other places, but they're very endangered in New Zealand. So, like most of the birds.
Oh, we got a little scenery here, a beach scene, and some agricultural country. Now, what I kind of found interesting about this hill country, you notice all these trails going back and forth. Well, consider man had only been on the island for 800 years. That's a lot of sheep going back and forth to make those trails and those hills. So anyways, but most of the country is very green. Obviously it's in the springtime, and very pretty. And anyways, as we got further inland, then you get into almost a tropical type of a environment. With the ferns and everything, and these large native trees of various types and everything. Up in the north part of the island, we went to a kind of a campground slash, it has little huts to rent where we were in one of the huts. Anyways, one of the features, the reason why we went there was two reasons. One, it had these eels, and you can see these eels right at the little fishing hole right beside the campground. There's three types of eels found in New Zealand. New Zealand longfin eel, which is endemic, shortfin eel, which is native, and Australian longfin eel, which is introduced. These are these longfin eels located at this holiday park. And so, I mean, if you'd rented a camper and you potentially could stay at this holiday park and watch these eels in the water, it's kind of creepy. like a bunch of snakes rolling around, but anyways. Ducks, we got some Australasian shovelers, which are native. Look very similar to our shovelers. Gray duck. Now the gray duck is, what were you gonna say, Lori?
So the gray duck is disappearing because it hybridizes with the mallards. And there's hardly any pure gray ducks left. And the way to tell is, of course, you can't in these pictures, but when they come out of the water, they have to have gray legs. Otherwise, they're considered a mallard hybrid with the orange legs. So anyway, and they still allow hunting, so they're definitely endangered.
New Zealand scaup, it's an endemic, and this is the only scaup in New Zealand. And
So you don't have to figure out if they're greater or lesser.
yeah, the shape of the head or whatever. Anyways, some of the songbirds, we got yellowhead, which is endemic. South Island tomtit, which is endemic. Hedgehog. Now, so I said there was two reasons why we went to that holiday park. The first reason was to see the eels. Second reason was trying to find a kiwi. But we didn't find a kiwi, but we found a hedgehog on the road at about 10 o'clock at night. That's why this picture isn't all that good. But anyways, these hedgehogs are cute, but a problem along with other introduced mammals such as feral cats, bush-tailed possum, brown and black rats, rabbits, stoats, goats, pigs, deer. All these animals, or mammals, I mean, are predators to all the birds, because most of the birds, when you think about it, up to like 800 years ago, had no mammal predators, so they could have a nest on the ground and be totally unprotected, and there's no issues. So anyways, the goal is for New Zealand to be predator free by 2050. The goats, pigs, and deer, what they eat is the habitat, and of course then they lose their hiding areas or whatever, and yeah. So
what was I gonna say? So there was a lot of predator-free reserves that we visited. And so thanks to the impact of the alien pest species, many of the endemic and native species are hard to find except in areas where these pests are controlled or have been eliminated. Some of the locations are offshore islands, which we visited, and some are on the mainland that have been enclosed with a predator-proof fence that you can see in that picture, or they have significant ongoing pest control programs. So many of the species were near extinct. The predator-free areas have allowed them to make a slow comeback. Many species have evolved into subspecies due to the fractured habitat, with pockets of populations that can't interbreed with their other birds. So
this is a fencing that'd be around a preserve. Now it is probably 8 feet high, maybe.
yeah, or more.
Yeah, and it will probably extend 2 or 3 feet underground. And you see over here beside the fence, right down here, that's one of the traps they have for anything that gets through the fence. So they're very serious about trying to protect all the endemic birds and that they have with all these, with the fences and everything. But you know what? It's never ending. I mean, someone bought over a possum thinking that they're going to harvest the fur and create a whole new industry. Before you know it, there's millions of possums on the islands that they have to now try to get rid of. So, hey, back to the birds. Little shag, it's native, and this guy is, I'm trying to think what size, it probably about 14 inches long or thereabouts. And so it's quite small. Double-banded plover, or the banded dotterel. And this is a cute little bird, or plover, with of course the rufous chest, or rufous, chest colored band. A Canada goose. Surprise, surprise. Introduced, I don't think it flew down there. Royal spoonbill, and it's native, and And it's just very similar to other spoonbills you see in Florida or whatever.
Except that it's got this bizarre, you can't see it in this picture, we couldn't get close to them. This bizarre bald face and then a spoonbill, black spoonbill. Yeah, they're very interesting to look at.
Yeah.
And they're from Australia.
Black swans. They were kind of interesting to watch and see. Some are native, and some are introduced. It kind of depends. Some of them fly over, I think, from Australia, and others have just stayed in New Zealand. Along the shorelines there in the swampy area, you're going to find the buff-banded rail, and it's native, and it's very similar to our rails in Canada. I'll see them other than the coloring. You can see the buff over here on this slide. This one's not quite as identifiable. Okay, so while we're waiting for the boat ride for Tiri, we saw this little guy in the bush beside us. I don't know if I can try to pronounce his name. Anyways, he's endemic.
And prehistoric.
And prehistoric, yeah.
We went to Tiri, Matangi Island. And this is just a short ride from Auckland. And it's the best example of an island sanctuary. So the pests were eradicated about 30 years ago. And then they planted over 250,000 native trees. And they brought in 11 endemic bird species. And these birds are flourishing to the point now that they can remove some of the birds and take them to the new established sanctuaries. And some of the birds are flying over to the mainland to Shakespeare Regional Park, which is the closest land to the island, and it's predator free. So some of the birds are successfully migrating back to the mainland, and they're doing well in that park. So we spent a day there, and it was fantastic. Highly recommended if you go to Auckland to take the ferry over.
Yeah, in fact, our guide was actually a registered guide at Tiri, and he would go over there volunteering to lead groups and also to maintain the habitat and reserve. It's all well-established trails to get there, and yeah, it's very, very nice little island, and even has a lighthouse. You can book a stay and stay overnight in a very primitive type of camping wooden structure, but we didn't have time, and so we didn't do that. But there we saw, a New Zealand bellbird, as we did at other locations. It's endemic. And we also, one of the reasons we went to the island was to see the red-crowned parakeet. It's endemic, and it can only be found in that location, if I remember right. The brown quail, there's almost like a little partridge. North Island saddleback, and again, you can see the saddleback here. These flowers that these birds are on, this bird and some of the other pictures. Lori's going to say something about it.
Well, it's called New Zealand flax, and it grows everywhere on the island. It's natural, endemic, and it makes a perfect backdrop for photos of the birds. And all these little tubes are filled with nectar. And so it was a bird magnet. If you saw the flax, you'd know there'd be birds there to take pictures of. So
Yeah,
it was,
all you had to do is wait.
yeah, it was.
Yeah. I saw a whitehead there. Obviously, the bird has a white head. Stitch bird, endemic. It's a pretty little bird. There's on a feeder. North Island robin, endemic. A couple different types of robin. We'll get into that in a little bit here. But this is the North Island. And then after we got off the island, went back into the mainland, and we saw the brown teal, which is endemic, and the gray teal, which is a kind of a pretty bird. Actually, they have a little green patch. Sometimes on the right light, you can see the little green, almost like a mallard green patch on the wing. New Zealand fern bird, It's endemic and
It was the tail.
what
Its
was-
claim to fame is it has this long, raggy tail. And so it's nice to get a picture that shows that, but it's an endemic bird
Yeah.
to New Zealand.
and it kind of skulks around in the underbrush. Yellowhammer, now here's this bush again. The yellowhammer, pretty little bird, almost like a little warbler. Now we get to the gannet colony. So there's approximately 1,000 nesting pairs of gannets on this colony. And
So this is also very accessible from Auckland. And it's only one of 3 mainland gannet colonies, so it's definitely worth a visit. Beautiful black sand beaches, nice walking trail, viewing platforms. When we were there, the birds were, some had eggs, some had babies, and some were courting. And the white-fronted tern also nests there, so it was a totally amazing time that we had there. I would have stayed longer, but we didn't have time.
I keep going.
Very amazing.
Here's 2 courting.
And they're only a couple of feet away from the viewing platform, so close.
Yeah, I mean, with my big zoom camera, I couldn't even take pictures. I had to use my iPhone to take these pictures just because the birds were so close to us. And to get all the little fleas out. So they lay a single egg, and you see on the left here where the feet are covering the egg. And then here they finally back up a little bit and you see the egg in there. And then we also have, these are what the chicks look like when they hatch. And yeah, they're quite a, I guess her mother loves her. But so here they're again grooming the chick and make sure there's no fleas or probably adding maybe
Oh, so
some
cute.
oils or whatever. So. That's a gannet colony. Okay, we went to one spot in New Zealand and the guide told us, says, well, the only reason why we're stopping here is to see a blue duck. We got on the bridge, looked down, there's a blue duck. 5 minutes later, it's gone. We never saw it again anywhere else in New Zealand. So boy, were we lucky.
And they're like our harlequins. They like the mountain streams with the swift, fast flowing water. So you have to really pick your spot to go find them.
I don't know if you've noticed in some of the pictures, but there's raindrops splattering on the water or whatever. I'll tell you, we were getting quite a bit of rain for a period of time there. And you take a look at me and it's like, hey, I'm looking pretty wet there. And of course, everything in Lorrie looks wet too. So yeah, it was, what can I say? It reminded me of Vancouver in the springtime where you can get 5 days of rain and 2 days of sunshine. So yeah, it was, you definitely want to, if you go there that time of the year in November, you want to have good quality rain gear, good quality footwear. And for us, even gloves, you want to have rainproof gloves because you're walking all the time and you're out in the cool, damp air and you need good equipment. And of course, the camera needs to be somewhere or another, it needs to be waterproof. Cook Strait. So you can see this when we crossed the Cook Strait from Wellington to Picton, that the seas were relatively calm, and there's a large ferry. I mean, it's like a BC ferry, very pretty. Once we got to Picton, the next day went on a day trip to Bloomin Island, but they didn't tell us about a wet landing. Of course, the wet landing is dependent on where the tide is. And by the time we got there, you see we got our feet a little wet. Anyways, the island was definitely worth it though. On our way to the island, we saw our first little blue penguin, endemic. So this guy is about 14 inches long. So it's not that big. Fluttering shearwater, endemic. We saw a spotted shag up in the rocks, and it's a very pretty cormorant. King shag.
So the king shag is very endangered. There's only a few small colonies in Marlborough Sounds. And the only way you can see them is to take a boat and go to the places where they're living, and they're very endangered. So we were happy to see these.
Yeah, they're probably 3 feet high, if not, or a meter. Whatever your
They were
preference.
big,
They were a big bird, big cormorant.
Yeah.
Or shag. Amongst the rocks, we saw the New Zealand fur seals, which are endemic. And some had pups and some didn't. Western Weka, Weka is endemic. And they greeted us as soon as we got off the boat onto the island. They were just down there wandering around looking at us and allowed us to get quite close and take pictures. South Island tomtit, endemic. The male on the left and female on the right. And yeah, they're a pretty little bird, just similar to some of the tomtits you see down in eastern Ontario. The orange-fronted parakeet. This is the reason why we went to this island. Critically endangered bird, restricted to a few small locations, less than 250. And you can see the tiny little orange band across the bill. Anyways, yeah, it's quite a bird. We saw was it
7.
there's 7 of them. So basically most of our pelagic trips, especially around in the islands, we saw the dusky dolphin, and this one is displaying for us. And yeah, they would just follow the boats around and play just like any other dolphin, and very used to humans and boats and that sort of thing. And while we were kind of cruising around this another island, we saw this killer whale or orca pod cruise along. They found that quite interesting because they totally didn't expect this orca pod in that area. And they had me send all my pictures of the pod to the local naturalists so they could try to ID them, see where they came from. Anyways, that was pretty exciting. It was totally unexpected. So and they were just cruising along the shoreline looking for whatever. Grebes. Well, there's a New Zealand grebe or a dabchick. It's endemic. And it's a cute little bird. Australasian or a great crested grebe. More on that in the next slide here, but yeah, it's quite the bird. And then the hoary-headed grebe on the right, as you can see, it looks like it's has a long hairdo that's gray. So this crested grebe, the city of Wanaka set up a nesting box in the marina for the grebes. So there was, I think, about 15 nesting boxes. So they were protected, so the boats could still come in and go out. These birds would have their nest and raise their chicks and everything. And yeah, so it was quite nice that the city had actually went ahead and done this to preserve the bird.
They're so handsome.
Yeah. Little scenery, one of the mountains that on our travels. I want to bring attention to this yellow bush along just below the trees here. This yellow bush was brought in to, I think, stabilize the land after clear cutting the forest. They brought it in without thinking about down the future as to what's going to happen with it. So as we're driving throughout New Zealand, we'd see these big clear cut patches of forest with the yellow bushes there, and they were basically taking over the land where the native trees had been. And so I asked our guide, well, why don't they try to get rid of it? He said, well, they have a hard time. I said, well, can't you use Roundup? He says, no, this bird or this bush is actually resistant to Roundup. They basically have to dig it up, each one, and try to burn it. So again, one of these things with, people are trying to bring in non-native stuff to try to, assist with their local issues and just create bigger problems. Some of the shoreline down the southern part of the South Island, and as you see, it's quite rocky, and yeah, there's great tidal pools and that sort of thing, and we enjoyed walking along there. Here's a couple of panoramic pictures of a beach, and I see Dunedin down here, and yeah, if you remember that the rocky shoreline I was showing you a picture of, we went on a pelagic trip just down the coast from there, and there's no docks, right? Because they have to bring the boats in all the time. There's so many rocks and everything. So I found it interesting that you have to have a guy on shore with a tractor, and you coordinate with him to launch your boat. And then when you come in, as you get close to the harbor, you call a guy up on the radio and say, come down, meet me. And he comes down with the trailer, backs in the water, and bring your boat right up on the trailer and hauls you back out, and that's it. And there's no docks per se, other than it's all dry land docks. I'm gonna turn on the sound here. Listen to the birds when they're arguing. Well, of course, they were fighting over the chum in the water that the boat captain put out. But anyways, yeah, these are one of the signs about earthquakes, and again, it's quite a serious situation. So we saw on that trip the northern giant petrel. This is a large bird, and northern royal albatross, endemic, the white-capped albatross, endemic. You can see that there's a white cap, and then a little bit of a gray area here just below the eye, and then the rest of the bird is white, or rest of the neck. The Buller's albatross has a gray head and gray neck, and it was Salvine's albatross. It was endemic, and it's quite a darker bird. And we saw these on this boat trip. So Cape Petrel, or pigeon, and this bird is very used to humans and likes to play around. And
Yeah, did you want me to talk about the pelagic?
sure.
So pelagic trips are a real major part of bird watching in New Zealand. We didn't realize that till we got there. But anyway, there's so many trips, and we ended up going on 4 of them. The birders that are on the boats, they all have these big cameras, and they take the photos of all the birds coming in. And then right on the spot, they look at their photos and they check for distinctive field marks, so they could ID a rare bird that might be mixed in with all the flock of other birds. And so it was really exciting, because they'd get this new bird and they tell everyone, and everybody'd look for it. So it was we really liked it. We didn't realize it till afterwards, but everyone on the boat, even the salty dogs, the people that have been there lots, they take sea legs, which is medication for seasickness. And we didn't know that, but we didn't get seasick. But the lady that was with us was very seasick for the whole day. So anyway, it was an interesting part of our birding trip. So
I found it interesting too, trying to take pictures of these seabirds when you're on a boat. So you take a picture of a flying bird that on land, and you kind of struggle with it a little bit till you finally get the knack, or the camera or whatever. But try taking a boat on 1 meter, 1.5 meter waves going up and down, and trying to capture a nice, clear, sharp picture. I'll tell you what, these 4 photographers that we had on the first pelagic trip with us, they were amazing. The pictures that these guys could pull off, and I couldn't even get a picture hardly of the bird in the water, let alone a flight shot that's nice and sharp and focused. So anyways, yeah, so it's a whole different ball game. Brown creeper, it doesn't look like our creeper, but the dunnock, and of course sheep. There is sheep everywhere, and lots of sheep. And again, you can see this in this background here, this yellow bush, and like you say, it's just, I have a hard time staying on top of it. Mute swan was introduced, and we've actually seen those elsewhere. So that we stopped on the way at the Castle Hill Conservation Area, one of the locations for the Lord of the Rings, and we were looking for a falcon there, and we did find them finally. He did a flyby, and so we could check off our list on it. So And it was just kind of nice to get out and walk around after sitting in the vehicle for a couple hours. So from there, we went through the Arthur's Pass, and the road there looks somewhat similar to BC roads. Landslides and that sort of thing, waterfalls and whatnot. So a Tira Valley in Arthur's Pass National Park, I mean, this is a great tropical alpine habitat. We hiked around there for a bit.
Yeah, that's what we see.
Yeah. So the thing I find interesting in our travels, when you're south of the equator, the big spruce trees and fir trees that we have up here in northern Canada, they don't have any down there. And you can see this is where they're fairly high altitude, and there's no trees. It's just the shrubs. So on our way heading west, we ran into the Kia, and the Kia is
Okay. This was one of my favorite birds, and it's the world's only true alpine parrot. And it's only found in the mountains in New Zealand on the South Island. And it's really inquisitive of people and vehicles. As you can see, you have to watch your vehicle or they'll just chew on everything. And it's really playful and intelligent. So we saw these a few places throughout Arthur's Pass, and I just really liked them.
they're a large bird too, a large parrot, probably well 16 inches big,
Yeah, yeah.
type of
And
thing.
they would try and get in your vehicle. We were sitting there and they were sitting on the mirrors trying to like get in. Anyway.
While we're traveling through the pass country there, we saw these white belted Galloways. Took a picture of it just because of the unique coloration of the cows with the white belt. And that going through Arthur's Pass, where we're heading to is Milford Sound.
And so we took a boat ride in Milford Sound, saw lots more birds and seals and things. Anyway, Milford Sound gets 9 meters of rain a year, 9 meters, and it rains 200 days a year. And we were there on one of those days that it rained.
Yeah.
But it creates all these amazing waterfalls. And of course, the boat goes up close, and we got totally soaked.
Again, you need good waterproof equipment.
Yeah.
People that have taken pictures and show Milford Sound with a clear blue sky, they're pretty lucky. Coming back from Milford Sound, we stopped at a little park and saw the South Island robin, endemic.
These robins are really cute because they're you think they're tame, but what they do is when you walk by, they come to your feet looking for the insects that might get stirred up. So if you want them to come out, you just stand on the trail and shuffle your feet, and they just come out, and you can get these amazing pictures. So they were pretty cute.
Yeah, with my lens, I had to back up to try to take a picture of these birds because they were so close. Yellow-eyed penguin. Now this is a bird that's endemic. There aren't that many left. They're fairly rare. And what else do you want to say about it?
They're highly
Anyways,
endangered.
so the male goes out, okay, and he fishes for a couple of days offshore. I think the guide told us about 30-40 kilometers, and he comes back in, and the female waits on the nest and waiting for the male to come back. So we were lucky enough that on the one tour we went on, we saw the male coming up the beach. We didn't see where he was going. On another self-guided trip that we did just after the main tour, we saw the female, and that's the picture in the middle. She's standing there just like a seafaring wife, looking out, where's my male, when's he coming back, whatever. And she stood out there for about 10-15 minutes, whatever, looking out on the ocean to see if he's going to show up, and he didn't show up while we were there. But yeah, it's pretty interesting. Fiordland penguin is endemic. The bird I got a picture of, the close one on the left, is at a rehabilitation center. He was found injured and brought in there to bring back up to so he can be released. And the bird on the right is a Milford Sound. And the reason why the picture is a little fuzzy is because it's raining so hard. Little blue penguin endemic, as I mentioned earlier. We saw these guys, and these are real cute little penguins. And I'm gonna run the video here, was saying that, so these penguins are located in the Dunedin at the Albatross Center. It's worth a visit during the day, as you can see the albatross, and then at nighttime, this is about 9 o'clock at night. There's about 300 little blue penguins nest here on the sandy bluff overlooking the ocean. So they come up in groups of, and you see here about 25 or 30 at a time. They head on up the bluffs, and I think the bluff is about 90 feet or so, and maybe 100 feet above the ocean. So they got to climb up all these little sand dunes to get to their nesting area. And the albatross nest up on above the center on the cliffs in behind. And then in behind the actual center, the red-billed gulls nest behind them. So you can see 3 different birds nesting at this one location at the Albatross Center. And again, it's very easy to get to from Dunedin. It's, maybe 30-minute drive. And yeah, well worth a visit to go see these guys. They're just so cute. Look at these guys checking things out. And yeah, anyways.
They're making their way to their burrows.
Yeah, they all have little burrows in the ground, so they all know where their address is and where they go. At the penguin place, I could say that's where we saw the albatross. No, actually, no, we saw a penguin there. And the penguin place has trenches that allows you to move from the center, from one blind to another blind, so your birds can't see you. So this trench here is about 4.5, 5 feet in the ground with netting over top. So you can walk all along, and they got all these trails. And you see over in this slide, some of these blinds over here. There's a blind here, and I think there's a blind back here. Anyways, that's where we saw one of the yellow, yellow, what kind of?
Yellow-eyed penguins.
Yeah, oh yeah, yellow-eyed, I'm gonna say yellow-billed, yellow-eyed penguins, and the male coming back, and so we could see it at a distance. We couldn't see the nest or anything, or the female waiting for him, but that's one location where you see them. So once we finished with there, we went over to Stewart Island, and there we saw the South Island kaka.
And so this was another favorite bird of mine, and it was our best yard bird, because this is where we stayed, and it was just right outside the door for two days. We could just go out and see it. And they told us to keep the doors closed because they would come right into your hotel room and look for food. They were so pretty. We really enjoyed them. And
I'm gonna make one note here about the hotel we stayed at, is that it was a small, like boutique motel, whatever, had about 6 units, and or maybe 8. Anyways, it doesn't matter. But with the price of the rental for the night, you got a car, and there's only on the Stewart Island probably 30 miles of roads to cover. So I mean, you could drive all day and you wouldn't go anywhere. And so it was kind of unique to have a motel room, and each of us got a car with our motel room. So yeah, it maybe wasn't a nice car, but I mean, it worked. So it was kind of cool. Anyways, one of the last nights on Stewart Island, we saw our first kiwi. Okay.
so this was our 5th attempt to find a kiwi. And anyway, we were out in this park. It was pouring rain. Anyway, the guide spotted a southern brown kiwi, and it actually walked right over to us. It checked my feet and smelled my pants, and I was just like, I stood stock still because they're so flighty. And then it continued looking for food in the rocks and ferns, and we watched it for about 15 minutes. And that was almost near the end of our trip, so we were pretty excited.
And these pictures are at about 10:30 at night, so
Yeah.
in the rain.
So it was the ultimate New Zealand experience to have a kiwi come up and smell me. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah. Anyways, some of the signs that you see around New Zealand, and we're coming up close to the end. I see the one on the left, dogs kill kiwi, keep them under control. So Anyways, during our trip on the north or south island, we saw Mount Cook in the rain, which is too bad, but that's the way it was. Milford Sound tour, saw the Franz Josef Glacier, which is a large glacier, actually similar to our Columbia ice fields. Stewart Island, of course, we went down to Stewart Island, which is the bottom left-hand side of the slide. Saw the little blue penguin colony and Dunedin City and surrounding area. If you're interested in architecture, old style architecture and everything, Dunedin is a place to go. You can spend a week there and look at all these old buildings and everything. The architecture is amazing, and it's a cool city. Totally different. As I said, Auckland is a modern city. Dunedin is a 1900s and 20 type city. It does have modern amenities, obviously, but that's it. So thank you for the opportunity. If you have any questions, we'll try to answer them as soon as I figure out how to get to it. So we travel over 4,200 kilometers with the guide. We also obviously travel ourselves at the beginning and the end. Visit 4 island sanctuaries that were predator free, went on 4 pelagic trips. Saw 137 species of birds, of which 111 were lifers, 71 eBird checklists. We spent a week in Auckland at the beginning and a week in Dunedin at the end. Tour was 21 days in length, so the rest of the time was on ourselves. And we would definitely go back again. I think John McFall said he hadn't been there since 1986. John, it's time to go back again.
Thank you very much, John and Lorrie. Wow, that was great. So there's a question here. What's the chance of New Zealand being free of invasives by 2050?
Slim. They said it's really
I would think.
hard, but it'll be nice if they make a good attempt.
Wow, that's amazing to think that they would even try that. Great. Looking for other questions here. Just lots of positive comments. Where the middle part of your, about 5-week tour was a guided tour?
Yes.
That's correct.
A 3-week guided tour and then time on your own at the beginning and the end.
Yes.
Yeah. And just to be, the first week we decided to use public transit because I wasn't going to attempt left-hand driving at my age. But by the 5th week, we rented a car ourselves and we drove around Dunedin and saw the local areas. And you obviously needed a car there just to get around to some of the areas. But yeah, it's, the highways are good, not quite as large as, shall we say, like Deerfoot or whatever, but certainly easy enough to get around.
And I would just tell him when he was on the wrong side.
Yeah, this truck's coming right at you, like, you're on the wrong side. Well, you hit the indicator and windshield wipers will go on and that type of thing, but anyways.
What was your favorite bird down there?
Well, I made a list actually. The fantail, the penguins, the key parrot, and the kaka parrot. Those 4 were we really enjoyed them.
Yeah, and of course the kiwi.
And question, how was the transit? I guess you took transit the first week.
We just took the ferry and we had to walk to the ferry. And that was all that. And then we also actually we got a shuttle to drive us to the Shorebird Center. And it was very expensive. And there's no there was no taxis where we stayed. Driving around, there was no taxis. So we hired a shuttle to take us.
Yeah, and when we got to the airport, it was probably an hour and 15-minute drive by road to go from the airport to Beachlands, the place we stayed at. And when I asked the owner at the bed and breakfast, I said, "Wow, I'll just take a taxi." She says, "Oh, you don't take a taxi." She says, "It'll cost you an arm and a leg." She says, "Use the shuttle." So anyways, that's where we got onto the shuttles.
So we can't really speak to the public transit.
Yeah, don't know what let's say if you stayed in Auckland itself, if you use the bus system, I have no idea.
Okay.
So
the
ferry system was excellent.
Another question, which tour company did you use?
Eagle Eye Tours out of
Eagle Eye.
Paramount. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, good. And did they arrange the 4 pelagic tours that you went on? Was that,
Absolutely. Everything was arranged. Yeah.
Yeah.
that was part of their trip?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
The
good.
first pelagic we went on was actually an adder, but because everyone went on it, they just sort of worked it into the whole trip. But it was a really good one, but it was $1,000 a person for the day.
For
So
1 day?
for 1 day, yeah,
Wow.
yeah. The other ones didn't go out as far and weren't for a full day, and they were cheaper.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Another question, how was the food expensive?
The food was was
Excellent.
good. I see John's comment there. Yeah, the food was excellent. We had you know, the standard fare that you would get here.
and lots of
yeah,
seafood.
yeah, lots of seafood, obviously, and a lot of different seafood. And the thing that I want to bring to everyone's attention is that there was no tipping at the restaurants. All people that work in New Zealand get a living wage.
So you just
So
pay.
you just pay for the food and that was it. Now, saying that, the cost of the meal at the end of the day was about the same as what I would pay here with a tip, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just build it in somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much. That most interesting, and it's always been on my bucket list to go there. And it's still there. Thank you very much.
Okay.
And I think we'll bring that to an end, and thank everybody for attending. And I hope you all have a good summer.